everyone. Welcome. My name is Baylor Rice. I will be your host today. I am one of the pharmacists and owner here at South River Compounding Pharmacy. So we're so very glad you were able to join us this afternoon. Couple of housekeeping notes real quick. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along. I really want this to be as interactive as you want it to be. So use the chat feature. You should have a button that says chat feature, so please ask any questions in there. Also, I have put up a poll there, so if you want to take a few minutes here, it's going to be up for about another 5 minutes, just asking some simple questions, kind of give me a good idea of where everybody is today with regard to thyroid functions, and that way I can kind of skew appropriately. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. We are recording. As we have been doing, we'll be recording this, and this will be up on our YouTube channel. So some of you may be watching this recording afterwards. So glad you're joining us. Go to our website, southriverrx.com. You can click on our YouTube icon, and that'll take you right to it. We've got a whole array and assortment of webinars on there. So feel free to go on there, give us a like to the channel. You'll get updates, and subscribe. And that'll keep you as up to date as possible. So with that, some disclaimers I'll let you read through. I won't read those to you. We don't disclose, or rather submit these to FDA prior for review or anything, nor do any speakers that I know of. So anyway, with that, we'll get started. A little quick review for those that are new to South River. Again, welcome. We are a compounding only pharmacy, so the definition of that is the mixing or making of 2 or more ingredients to form a final product. So in really the U.S. and as well the Commonwealth of Virginia, anything that is compounded does require a prescription. So that is us working together with your prescriber, really as a medical team, to get you something customized and something that's exactly for what you may need. We were the first modern day compounding only pharmacy in Virginia, and we do specialize in natural medicine. We specialize in vitamins, minerals, herbals, homeopathics. We do personalized consultations, so really working together with patients, looking at your history, and especially with thyroid today, this is so very imperative. So looking at your history and symptoms and labs and pulling all that together to get a very specific protocol just for you. So I am trained in functional medicine and definitely kind of your East meets West, if you will. And we've got a whole host of different testing available, so that we can kind of help look into whatever you have going on a little bit more in-depthly. Ideally, whatever we can do to give us some optics, right? Some additional information into your health, I think is a fantastic tool. So with that, we'll get started. And I kind of call this my ADD slide, and we'll come back to this later. But, you know, the hypothalamus regulates pituitary. Pituitary regulates the sex hormones, the thyroid as well. I'm sorry, I need to move the polling thing off my screen so I can circle it, and the adrenals. And today, of course, we're going to be focused on the thyroid. We do have up on our YouTube channel a presentation on the sex hormones and hormonal function, as well as the adrenals. But I will touch on the adrenals a little bit today, because those have a huge negative feedback loop to the thyroid. So if you do have a thyroid issue, I can almost guarantee you, and there's rarely do we find always and never exist in medicine, right? So this is going to be about as close as we can come. I can almost guarantee you there's an adrenal issue, right, to where that's struggling. But ultimately, it's the balance of this whole plane that we really want to achieve. So with that, we'll really kind of drop into the thyroid here. And let's see, we've got a little less than a minute left on the poll. So I'll give you folks a little bit longer, and then we'll kind of review that. So the thyroid gland consists of many different follicles, and certainly this is increased about 25 times. So again, as I had on the previous slide, hypothalamus regulates pituitary. That's going to really have that feedback loop to the thyroid gland. So when the brain is sensing it doesn't have enough thyroid hormone and it needs more, it sends messengers, thyroid stimulating hormone, to the thyroid gland. Hey, make me more thyroid, right? And the body's going to produce primarily T4. So from that T4, we have to metabolize it into our utilizable T3. And when the brain is sensing it has too much thyroid hormone, then it's going to back off the messengers and send less, really give a negative feedback, if you will. So the body slows down production. So there's an inverse relationship. As this TSH rises, so as that becomes high, that's more hypothyroidism. Okay, underactive thyroid. So hypo, sluggish thyroid. So you know, always think of here, it's easy here, sluggish energy, sluggish brain function, sluggish metabolism. So if that TSH is too low, that's going to be more hyperthyroidism, right? So overactive thyroid. So typically there we're going to see kind of the palpitations. We can start seeing palpitations, start feeling overactive, and that's where we're going to need to back off of our medication. So, and or address the thyroid being overactive. So let me look at this just a second. So this is really kind of your answers here, kind of are very congruent with what I typically see. So those that responded, do you have hypothyroidism? Yes. Those that have hyperthyroidism, no one answered yes in that. So typically we see lots more hypo versus hyper. And that's why today's presentation will focus more, I'll touch on both, but we are going to focus more on hypo, underactive, because that's typically what we see more of. And then as far as other folks that didn't answer yes on either one of those, then the rest of you said, yes, I think I have a thyroid issue, right? And that we see very commonly to where, you know, hey, doc, I think I have a thyroid issue. Will you draw some thyroid labs on me? And those labs come back, quote unquote, normal, right? And you're like, oh, dang it. You know, I was really kind of secretly hoping for the lab to be off because I've been gaining weight and I've had no energy and my brain's not working. I'm not sleeping as well. So I was really kind of hoping that it was going to be the thyroid, so then I could take thyroid medication and that was going to be the answer to everything I have going on. Well, why do we see this? Most of the time they're just drawing a TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. And I'll have a slide on this in a bit. I like to look at the free T3, the free T4, the reverse T3, as well as some other items looking more in depthly at the thyroid. But again, that TSH is just looking at the feedback loop. So it's not necessarily looking at how much gas we have in the gas tank, right? Or is it overfilling? Or is it just down here on empty? So we can look at that more in depthly. And the other thing to remember here too is what I see is it takes about 10 years for the labs to catch up with the functioning of the gland. So let me rephrase that. We'll see symptoms. We'll see you banging your head against the wall for about 10 years before finally that TSH is off enough to where your practitioner is going to go, hey, I know what your problem is. You've got a thyroid issue. And you're sitting going, man, I've got the same symptoms I've had for 10 years, right? Well, now the feedback loops has finally caught up with it. So what we do, and what functional medicine, how trained is trying to look at this and catch at this before we have a diagnosable issue, and what we can do to support the functioning of the gland as well as the metabolism of the thyroid hormone. So some review overall of the function of the thyroid gland, right? Helps with metabolism, helps with our thermoregulation, cellular function, growth, development, energy, helps with cancer, cardiovascular, brain function, helps with fat breakdown, oxygen utilization. So an awful lot within the system. So here, these next two slides are typically what I ask. There are about 19 questions here, and this is what I ask our patients on typical thyroid questions. So if you go through here and you start checking off some of these, okay, well, I have unusual fatigue unrelated to exertion, chillier than others, dressing in layers, anxiety leading to panic, trouble with weight, not losing a pound, aches and pains unrelated to exercise, increased problems with digestion or allergies, mentally sluggish, focused, forgetful, family history of thyroid issue, suffer from dry skin, acne, eczema, going through periods of depression or decreased sex drive, family history of diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, early graying hair dry, falling out, lots of menopausal symptoms despite, being on estrogen, and or migraines despite estrogen. So menopausal symptoms or increase in migraines. History of whiplash or neck injuries, lots of exposure or history of chlorine, bromine, or fluoride exposure. Exhausted by eating yet trouble sleeping, waking up tired, or if that temperature is low in the morning before your feet hit the floor. So if you're checking off a bunch of those, then yes, we need to look deeper at your thyroid, which is why you're probably watching this today. Well, what can I do about it? What can I help? So let me kind of break this up a little bit, and I'm going to spend just, again, a very brief period on hyperthyroidism. We do see it, we do work with it, but most patients tend to end up having more hypo versus hyper. So hyper, we can also have fatigue with that, but typically we're going to see more palpitations and nervousness, sweating, tremor, weakness, tend to have weight loss versus with hypo, more weight gain. Periods for the females can get off. Blood pressure tends to go up, hyperactivity, heat intolerance, and a lot of times that's where we'll see the goiters and growth. So if there's an autoimmune component to it, so if your thyroid antibodies are elevated, if your thyroid peroxidase is elevated, well, then we must absolutely go gluten-free, okay? Gluten certainly being a grain, that is increasing the inflammatory processes with the thyroid. So you need to pull gluten out. And when I say pull it out for you, I mean absolutely 100% in these cases. Also, we need to worry and pull out the aspartame. That gets metabolized to formaldehyde. That's what you use to preserve a dead body with. Splenda, that is basically chlorinated table sugar. So chlorine, the problem with that, it's a fluorohydrocarbon, so that's going to affect the iodine piece, which, when you look at both T4 and T3, you've got a thyroid backbone. T4 has 4 iodine molecules on it, right? So thyroid backbone with 4 iodine molecules on it. T3, oops, that's supposed to be minus, not plus. T3 is a backbone with 3 iodine molecules on it. So those hydrocarbons, so the chlorine, the bromine, the fluoride, that's affecting the metabolism of one of those iodines coming off that molecule to become the active T3 molecule. That's why that's such an issue. Certain medications will also play a role with the metabolism. Beta blockers, propylthiouracil, methimazole, hydrocortisone, radioactive iodines. Now, sometimes they'll use these things, right? So if you're hyper, sometimes they'll use radioactive iodine as a way to block that thyroid to slow it down, as well as methimazole. And sometimes we'll see propylthiouracil used for those purposes, right? LDN, low dose naltrexone. That is a compounded medication. Again, that does require a prescription. We use that for all of our autoimmune patients, all of our inflamed patients. It does a great job with helping with the inflammatory process as well as the immune process in the system. So that is something that we use to help with autoimmune thyroid issues. Where that hits, again, not going to go real in depth on this today. We do have a webinar on low dose naltrexone, but I wanted to show this because it's hitting a variety of pathways, right? That's why we see such a wide array of use with low dose naltrexone. Typically, we'll start with 1.5 milligrams for every night for about 7 days. Then we'll go to 3 milligrams at bedtime, and then we'll increase that to 4. Most patients are going to maintain with about 4.5 milligrams a day. Now, Trekzone is available commercially. However, it's at a much higher dose. It's about 50 milligrams. So you can't break that tablet up to make it 4.5. And at higher doses, it works differently in the system. So at higher doses, they use it for addiction purposes and that. So that's not why we're using it with low dose. Low dose, it works oppositely, kind of at the receptor level. So helps with inflammation, helps with immune. Some gluten-free grains. So just because we may tell you to go gluten-free doesn't mean you have to totally avoid grains, but it does mean that we need to adjust what grains you're eating. So some nutritionals, there's lots of herbals and nutritionals we can use to help with the system at this point. So certainly PABA, thymus extract, selenium, vitamin C, methylcobalamin, magnesium glycinate, cat's claw, L-carnitine, iodine, zinc, alpha-lipoic acid, vitamin B6. In flavonoid complexes, an herbal formulation that has ginger, curcumin in it. It also has some quercetin as well as an acetylcysteine and zinc, so kind of a combination product. Active immune support is something we put together going after COVID. Well, it just so happens, really pulling that out, looking at all the research, it works very good, not just for the inflammatory process going on with COVID and the immune and viral piece, but also autoimmune and inflammatory autoimmune issues. So active immune support works very good for that as well. And here's a picture of what that is. So the NAC, quercetin, EGCG, vitamin C, as well as zinc. And we'll go anywhere from 1 capsule a day for kind of maintenance or preventative, and increase it up to 4 to 6 a day if needed, really, if we're having an issue or having a flare-up, if you will. So now to transition to hypothyroidism. So brittle nails, cold hands and feet, really having a harder time with cold, wearing socks to bed, mood, difficulty swallowing, dry skin, will tend to see cholesterol go up, right? So, that's where it also is kind of looking at the whole thing. Do we just shoot the messenger? Or do we try to figure out what the body is telling us? So, far too often people are apt to, well, my cholesterol's elevated, let me go on a statin drug. I go, all right, time out. Why is the cholesterol elevated? And try to help figure out that. So this is, a lot of times we'll see that cholesterol kind of modify back out once we get proper thyroid function. Essential hypertension, so the blood pressure going up, eyelids swelling, fatigue, the hair loss, the hoarseness, lower blood pressure we can see as well, concentration issues, fertility, irritability, menstrual irregularities, weakness, nervousness, memory, throat pain, weight gain, right? And that's a big driver for so many people for hypothyroidism, and really looking at it and getting frustrated when the labs come back. Well, that's, darn, I was hoping it was off because I've gained 50 pounds and I'm eating like a bird and I'm working out like a fiend and just nothing's going anywhere. Well, we're going to have a hard time if that thyroid's off. So as I mentioned earlier, the body is what, we primarily are producing T4, as well as if you are on thyroid replacement. So about half of you checked off that you've got hypothyroidism. So more than likely you're on a T4, right? There's lots of options, but so most of the time, most prescribers are going to prescribe Synthroid as the brand name. Levothyroxine, Tirosint, there's a bunch of different names for it, but it's T4. So that T4 has to be metabolized into T3, right? Well, when you think about that, half the time it gets metabolized into the correct molecule, free T3. Half the time it goes into something called reverse T3. So reverse T3 is a mirror isomer. It looks the same in the mirror, but in reality, it's a different structure. So what we don't want that reverse T3 too high and or the free T3 too low, right? So a lot of times what we'll do is have to kind of work on blocking this pathway so it goes more down the free T3 because this is where the rubber meets the road. So some medications that can affect that conversion: birth control pills, beta blockers, synthetic estrogen, iodinated contrast agents, lithium, phenytoin, steroids, theophylline. Some nutrient deficiencies. So if you're low in these nutrients, right, chromium, selenium, zinc, some Bs, iodine, that's going to affect that T4 to T3 conversion. Diet-wise, I'm not saying don't eat cruciferous vegetables or don't eat soy, but if you're eating lots, then that can be affecting that conversion. Probably about 15 years ago, I had a patient with her labs off and diving into it, found she was eating 2 pounds of broccoli a day. Well, broccoli's great, does wonderful for estrogen metabolism, helping to shunt down the 4-hydroxyestrone pathway, but it's a little bit overkill. And that was, in her case, affecting that T3 to from T4 conversion. Some other things that affect it, certainly aging, right? The older we get, the better we were. Alcohol, lipoic acid, diabetes, fluoride, lead, mercury, having extra fat mass. Fat mass is going to increase inflammation, right? Inflammation ultimately is what kills. Pesticides, radiation, stress, right? So that's the adrenals playing in. Surgeries, all of those can affect the T4 to T3 conversion. So what are the prescription options for, I've got hypothyroidism, Baylor, my T4 is elevated, the doctor wants to put me on something. Well, certainly so often they'll want to put you on Synthroid or a generic thereof, Levothyroid, Levoxyl, Unithroid. If you've got allergies or sensitivities to one of the ingredients, we can certainly compound dye-free, lactose-free, gluten-free, alpha-gal-free, a compounded just straight T4, okay? Other things, you may say, well, gee, I want to go on a glandular product. I've heard about Armor or NatureThyroid. Yes, absolutely. Those are glandular products. They do have some T4 as well as some T3 in them. And we can also compound T3, T4 combinations. We can also compound thyroid USP, which is that glandular piece, right? Why would we want to compound A? They don't make the strength I need, or it's can't get it, it's commercially unavailable, or from the dyes or preservatives or fillers, right? A lot of those will have cornstarch, and some patients will have some sensitivities to that. So we can compound a T4, T3 combination. Of course, again, anything we compound is going to require a prescription, just as though your Armor or Synthroid prescription would. For straight T3, you've got Cytomel. The problem with Cytomel is it's only available in 2 strengths, 25 mics and 5 mics. That does contain both sucrose as well as talc. So again, that can be an allergy sensitivity issue. So very often what we'll do in this case is compound more of a sustained release T3. Why? Because this Cytomel is an immediate release product. So the problem with that is, boom, your half-life is only 2 hours. So it's a very quick window that you're going to have drug distribution within your system, which is why so many people will try it and, well, you know what, I felt better for a little bit, but then all of a sudden, bam, it just seemed to drop out from beneath me. So what we'll do is put it in what we call methicillin E4M. So we get more of about, a 10 to 12 hour release. So we'll get a much better drug distribution in the body, really impacting that T3. And quite honestly, this is why right here, that 2-hour half-life is why so many different prescribers don't use and or don't like using a lot of T3, just because patient outcomes with it, it's kind of spotty. There again, we sustain or release it, we tend to get much better outcomes, sustain that reaction and an impact on the system, patients feeling much better, and ultimately helping to pull that T3 up to where we want it. You may have gone to your prescriber and said, hey, you know what, I want to, I'd like to try Desiccated, which is like the Armor or Nature Thyroid type that has some T3 and T4 in it. Your prescriber may have said desiccated thyroid is not consistent from dose to dose. Well, back in 1997, I did pull an excerpt out, and I am going to read this. I generally don't read slides, as you can tell. I just kind of go through it. But I am going to read this part because of how critical I think it is. In 1997, the FDA reported no currently marketed orally administered levothyroxine sodium product has been shown to demonstrate consistent potency and stability, and thus no marketed orally administered levothyroxine sodium product is generally recognized as safe and effective. That's in the Federal Register, August 14, 1997, volume 62, number 157. So for you out there that your doctor said, well, I don't want to do that because the dosage are inconsistent. Well, guess what? And they only want to prescribe T4. Guess what? The FDA has said this about T4. Okay. So the bottom line there is, if you have a prescriber practitioner that's not working with you, not listening to you, there's far too many good prescribers and practitioners out there. Let's get somebody new that will listen to you and work with you. So how do I know whether or not I need T3 or T4? Well, let's look at some labs. As I alluded to earlier, I want to look at more than just TSH. Again, the range for TSH is 0.45 to 4.5 on most labs. Ideally, I like it less than 2, preferably closer to 1. Reverse T3 also has a range of anywhere about 9 to 25. I like it less than 15. Free T4, ideally up closer to about 1.2. Free T3, ideally closer to about 3.5. Again, most of these are going to have these huge ranges. So what we've done is let's try to narrow that up and also find your sweet spot. For thyroid peroxidase, thyroid antibodies, so you need to pay attention to that because they have kind of cutoffs. For one, it's about 30, and depending on which labs, of course, it can vary. But, let's say the cutoff's 30, and if you're above 30, then it's positive. If it's below 30, it's negative. Well, what if you're 28? Well, you're not 0, you're not 1. It still has a number. You still have some inflammation. You're still having an immune reaction. It's just not officially high. Well, we'd still want to address that. Ferritin. So it's very important to know, do we have an autoimmune thyroid inflammatory issue going on with the thyroid? Absolutely imperative to know. Ferritin looks at iron stores. The reason why I like looking at that, both ferritin and vitamin D can impact how the thyroid binds at the receptor level. So ferritin, I want up closer, at least above 70, closer to 90. Vitamin D, the range on that is 30 to 100. Now, my ideal is at least above 60, somewhere between 60 and 80, right? Ferritin can run anywhere from about 115, 15 to 150. So it's more than just let's have the labs done and okay, well, I fell within normal limits, but let's have the labs and let's really sit down and see are they where we want them to be. Some additional things we can look at, certainly red blood cells, magnesium, selenium, zinc, and iodine levels. As I mentioned earlier, what's your morning temperature? And morning temperature when you're still lying down before your feet have hit the floor, so keep that thermometer next to your bedside. And of course, tying in symptoms, on the symptom checkoff pages I had for you, are you checking a bunch of those off? And also, at that point, maybe like yesterday, I had somebody that had 15 out of 19 symptoms checked off. But maybe you've only got 7 out of 19, but yet yours are 7 out of 19 are very severe, right? And that's going to weight that a little bit heavier. Certainly looking at the adrenals. I look at adrenals with salivary levels, both cortisol as well as DHEA. Why do we want to look at that via saliva? Because with blood, it would be a single point in time. You can look at it with blood, but I really want to track it. I want to know what your number is before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner, before bedtime. So we can really chart what is that diurnal pattern. That's what's going to give us the most information for the adrenals. Okay. We can also look at the sex hormones. Okay. And this is what we look at for females. Got any males on today? Certainly reach out to Allison and she can let you know what we'd like to see for males and share that with you. And the key is, labs detect disease, not optimal function. What we target at South River is optimal function, right? So other options for looking at the thyroid, if it's, I don't like getting blood draws, well, we can always do a finger prick test to look at thyroid labs. So lots of options there. If your doctor will not, if you have a practitioner that is not ordering the labs for you, you can go to our website and click on other services, and under other services, you'll see an Ultra Lab tab. And that you can go and order your own labs. So without having your practitioner order it, you need your practitioner to order it if you want to run it through your insurance. Okay. So otherwise, if your doctor won't draw it, or if you've got a high deductible, our Ultra Lab service is about 83% on average off of typical retail. So it's a way that you can either A, save money to have labs done if you've got a high deductible or don't have insurance, or B, if you can't find somebody that will order what we want to see, then this puts you in the driver's seat and the ability to order what you need and what you want. Basal body temp, wanted this on here for those, well, how do I do it? So we've got a slide in here showing you exactly how to do it and where we want to target normals for you. So let's talk about some nutrients, what we can do supplement-wise to help with the thyroid. And I think, before we start there, I think it's important to understand, well, what should I be taking as my baseline? So really, we went to calling these Baylor's baseline supplements some time back, just because so many people were coming into the pharmacy and asking, well, Baylor, what do you take? What would you take? And just, okay, I don't have anything wrong. I'm healthy. What do I need to take for optimal health? Well, let's get you on a therapeutic multivitamin. Our phytonutrient multi is a food-based multi, and it has methylated B vitamins in it. Very rich in antioxidants. I like methylated Bs versus normal Bs because about half the population has what's called an MTHFR deficiency. That is a genetic snip in your helix to where you're not metabolizing your B12 and folic acid properly. So this hedges our bet and has you covered on that. So anywhere from 1 to 2 a day. Well, when do I take 1? When do I take 2? Well, the bigger you are, gravitate more towards 2, or the more symptomatic you are, the more stress you have, then I'm going to gravitate towards 2. And that's based on the tablet. It's also available as capsules. Capsules, that one is anywhere from 1 to 3. So they're able to compress it down into a smaller space. With tablets. Capsules, it takes more capsules to get that same amount of nutrient in. Fish oil, omega-3 essential fatty acid. I am an absolute huge fan of fish oil. Good for everything head to toe, whether we do it with capsules or our 1,000 milligram Pure Omega has 1,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA, which are the active chemical constituents in fish oil, per capsule, right? Or liquid Baylor, I don't want to swallow that big capsule. It's a pretty decent sized soft gel, okay? Then we do the liquid, and anywhere from 1 to 2 teaspoons a day. There again, depending on, are you healthy? Or, if where I would gravitate towards the higher dose, If you're having issues, if the cholesterol is elevated, if you've got blood sugar issues, cardiovascular, family history, neurological issues, then I'm going to gravitate towards the higher side. Vitamin D3, great supplement, especially with the immune system, helping with inflammation, helping with immune function. So with COVID, the data is absolutely huge with regard to helping with prevention. And then also, if you have a higher level of vitamin D and are exposed to the COVID virus, it's going to help decrease symptoms. 5,000 IUs a day for adults. Pardon me. I will go higher than that if I have labs, but without labs, I'll start at 5,000 IUs. Ideally, I would do ours that has some K2 in it. K2 is going to help pull the calcium into the bones versus letting the calcium potentially deposit in the endothelial of the cardiac tissue. So trying to help against plaque buildup. The other thing I like is baseline is CBD. Absolutely, CBD hits 220 different systems in the human body. Whether we do tinctures, capsules, gummies, it doesn't matter to me. The key is doing a quality CBD, right? Which that's all we're going to have for you at South River. We've already vetted all the companies we deal with. So then it's just how you want to take it and getting the dosage to the right point. So to get into what we use, thyroid support complex is what we call an adaptogenic formula for the thyroid. So if you're hyper or if you're hypo, it's going to help stabilize and support the thyroid. So a lot of those nutrients I went over earlier with regard to having an impact on thyroid function, you'll notice, wow, they're built into here. Now, is there duplication with this and with what's in the phytonutrient multi? Absolutely there is, because if you're having a thyroid issue, you're burning these things up and you need additional support. Okay, so that's why we push that harder. And then there's some herbals in here. Typically, it's one capsule 3 times a day. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It is non-GMO and it is gluten-free. So that's one of my first go-tos. So especially if it's, well, Baylor, my TSH is okay. It's within range, not too far off, and or, you're on thyroid replacement, but yet you're still having symptoms. Well, then what this is going to do, it's got the nutrients to help get that T4 metabolized over into the free T3, right? It's going to help support this pathway versus the reverse T3 pathway. So very well tolerated, works well. These other slides, I wanted to include them for you so you'd have them for your reference. I'm not going to read through them, but what these are giving you additional information on all of these nutrients and at least a lot of the nutrients that we have in thyroid support complex. So vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, iodine, selenium, right, zinc. So some other things that we use for thyroid, of course, making sure we've got the basics on board. And then we do have one called thyroid support complex, which I just spoke about. There's also a separate one called thyroid complex, little bit different formulation. And as well, we can always add some extra iodine, kelp, add some extra E, C, tyrosine, etc. Thyroid 150, I only use for hypo, okay? We do not use that for hyper, okay? Thyroid support complex can be used for both. Because the thyroid 150 is going to help lower that TSH. So I'm only going to use that supplement if I have a TSH and I know where that is, okay? And that's up a little bit. It's above optimum where we want it to be. So let's talk about some common adrenal symptoms. And I'll remind you, if you have some questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and I'll address those as we go along. Adrenal symptoms. So fatigue, lack of energy, energy crashing in the afternoon, craving salty foods, craving sugars, carbs, exhausting easily, decreased sex drive, sensitive to changes in the weather, circles under eyes, wounds healing slowly, body sensitive to touch, puffy, swollen all over, mind racing at bedtime. So if you're kind of going check, 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 again, we need to be thinking about adrenals. Now, typically in our questionnaires, we ask it from an aspect of absent, mild, moderate, severe. So also, one aspect you get, well, gee, I'm checking all of these off in mild, or you can say, well, I've got some absent, but I've got a number out here at severe or moderate. Again, depending where you are and the number that you've got, then that's going to be, okay, well, then let's look at that cortisol, right? Let's see where your data is. And, are you way up here? Are you way down here? Are you in the middle? Data, right? Let's look at data. And also depending how long you've been going at it and or how severe. Otherwise, a lot of times if it's, well, I've got some mild, a few things in moderate, and certainly, yes, but I've got some stress, then there's a variety of different herbals that we'll use to support the adrenal function. So both adrenal support and cortisol support are very similar, kind of analogous to the thyroid support complex. Okay, so they are adaptogenic formulas. So if you're high, it helps pull it down. If it's low, it helps pull it up. So both of these, one capsule twice a day, where I gravitate towards one or the other. If it's more low energy, I'll gravitate more towards the adrenal support. If it's more, there are some energy, but we've got some overwhelming, we've got a lot going on, maybe some trouble brain functioning, then I'm going to gravitate more towards the cortisol support. And then we can plus or minus, if you will, the L-theanine on top of that. Okay, so L-theanine is derived from the green tea leaf. It helps to balance the norepinephrine and epinephrine. So it does a good job of just kind of pulling that weight off the shoulders, feeling overwhelmed, helping with the concentration. Typical adult dose, we've got 200 milligram capsules. We also have 100 milligram, but typically I'm going to dose at 200 at a time, 3-4 times a day. Sometimes I'll even add, 2 capsules. So go to 400 milligrams at bedtime if we're having a hard time kind of shutting that brain down. Tranquil is a great formulation if we've got a lot of stress, and a key word here for Tranquil is worry. So if worry is really a big component, then Tranquil, an Ayurvedic formulation that does really well. Again, CBD should kind of be baseline, but do we want to pop that CBD up higher? Are we taking a high enough dose? So increasing the CBD would be an option there. Methylation support. So certainly we should be on the multi. The multi has methylated B vitamins in it. Do we need to take that higher? Do you have a need that we need to pop them up higher? Then we can add in methylation support to the current multi. So those are my key go-tos. Cortisol synergy I will only use if I have labs. So if we know where that cortisol is tracking, right? So if you're like that, but yet we want it to be, more, well, that's more like that, then we'll use that to help pull it up, okay? Because that is going to pull up the cortisol. Quality. If you've heard me before, I'm a big stickler on quality. So we deal with companies, I vet everybody we deal with, GMP certified, registered with the FDA, following third-party analysis and doing testing, dissolution, disintegration, mass spectroscopy, liquid chromatography. So we want to make sure it is what it's supposed to be. So diet, TSH. TSH increases when we don't have a good source of protein in the diet. So this is going to decrease thyroid function. So that's one reason why I have back here additional support protein shakes. So we've got a variety of high quality protein shakes that we can use. So if you don't have adequate protein in the diet, now you may not have adequate protein in the diet as a result of several things. Are you vegetarian and having a hard time getting protein on board? B, do you have sore throat? Are you having issues, swallowing issues, etc., that's impacting that? Or do you have certain food allergies, food sensitivities that's limiting your diet that we need to do that? So there again, we've got a lot of hypoallergenic shakes we can use to help make sure we have adequate protein, to make sure we have adequate amino acids on board to help. Okay. Many thyroid imbalance patients are also hypoacidic, so not having enough actual acid or quality acid on board to kind of break things down. So if that's the issue, we can use our digestive supporter Medigest, which is going to have betaine, HCl, glutamic acid in it to actually help assist in breaking things down. Overall, I gravitate towards a Mediterranean style diet, typically 5 to 6 smaller meals a day versus 2 or 3 larger. Will I use 2 or 3 larger? Will we also do, intermittent fasting? Will we use ketogenic? Will we use inflammatory diets, modified elimination diets, detox diet, gut diet, inflammatory diet, paleo? Absolutely. Right. It's all dialing it in for each individual patient and where you are. But as a whole, Mediterranean is where I tend to gravitate, and that's where we pivot from. Why? Because it's globally the healthiest diet. The data supports it. Lots and lots of data. Exercise intensity, right? So I'm a huge advocate for exercise. Ideally, we need to be getting those of us that are past our mid 40s, we need to be getting some cardio. The data suggests and shows 300 minutes of cardio a week. Can we over exercise? Absolutely yes. And this is where that is. So if we're continuing at 90% of maximum heart rate, that can affect the T3, T4 balance, right? So we do want to be aware, are we overtraining? Okay. And, maybe you've got something coming up. Maybe, I want to do a marathon. I want to do the Ironman, Iron Woman. Well, so, yes, there are times where we'll do that, but just be aware of that. Okay. And be aware of maybe we need to do something to further help support the metabolism of the thyroid hormone. Lots of different books out there. David Brownstein's written a number of different things on thyroid. The Overcoming Thyroid Disorder is a great one overall. Certainly, if you're, I want extra information on iodine, he's got a great book on that. Adrenal Fatigue by Jim Wilson. So if you've got a lot of adrenal stuff going on, I do caution you for that. I like Jim a lot, known him for years. It's as you go through his book, you'll note that he suggests a lot of different supplements, and absolutely I advocate and agree with what he puts in there. However, it can totally overwhelm you. Come in, let us help you with that, dissect what's going to be the most fine-tuned for where you're at. Otherwise, you could end up with, a dozen different things saying check, yeah, all that makes sense. And yes, but then I was already overwhelmed because I was adrenally stressed, and now, oh my goodness, now I got a dozen different things to take. Now I'm totally sensory overload. No, let us help you get that in check. Overall, it is a balance, right? 8 hours of straight sleep, making sure we have enough exercise on board, but we're not overdoing it, balancing our illness, trying to decrease and get optimal health, getting supportive relationships on board, making sure we're at a proper nutritional state, hormonal balance, clean environment, trying to avoid the toxins, pesticides, eating as organic as we can, right? Free range. So some overviews, everyday essentials, the phytonutrient multi, the fish oils, vitamin D, the Boxley CBD. If we want to pull in something to help support the thyroid, first step I'd add is the thyroid support complex. If you've got an immune issue going on board, then adding that active immune support. From a stress, anxiety, adrenal aspect, cortisol support 1 twice a day if we're really kind of feeling overwhelmed. plus minus, you can add some extra L-theanine. From a sleep perspective, ultimate sleep support is an herbal formulation. Generally, I start with 1 at bedtime, do that for a couple of nights and go to 2, then go to 3 if we need to. If you also want to get CBD, it's a way to hit 2 birds with 1 stone. This does have 25 milligrams of broad spectrum CBD plus an extra 3 milligrams of CBN, which is more sleep oriented, plus 3 milligrams of melatonin. So that does a great job. We're having wonderful results with that formulation. Ideally, either one of those take about 30 to 60 minutes prior to bedtime. Okay. With regard to CBD, I'll just mention this on that. The statement from the NIH, modulating the endocannabinoid system may have therapeutic potential in almost all diseases affecting humans. Absolutely huge. Again, if you want additional information, go to our YouTube channel and watch the CBD webinar. Here's just a brief, quick link, if you will, to a number of them: men's health, women's ED, libido, COVID, inflammation, etc. Let's see. That's the wrong one. I'm sorry. I thought I updated that. Webinar special today. We do have, and we'll run this through the end of November. We do have some short dated broad spectrum 450. This is for the orange citrus only. So the 450 milligram strength will give you 7 free of the Boxley CBD energy drink. So that's going to give you additional CBD as well as amino acids. It's a fantastic energy drink, low in sugar, so great alternative to those Red Bulls. And if you're having that dip in the afternoon and you're reaching for a candy bar or something else, well, let's get a little bit of CBD on board. It's got some caffeine, has some amino acids to kind of carry you through the afternoon without making that blood sugar go spike. We've got the 900 and citrus orange too. Buy one of the 900, get 12 free of the CBD drink mixes. So that'll, give you a solid, this one 2+ work weeks, and this one work week plus, the weekend. And I may or may not have tried that on the weekend, mixing it with a cocktail, kind of your alternative to Red Bull and vodka, much tastier and lower sugar. Okay, definitely not during the day, during work though, okay? Even if you're zooming for work, nope, let's wait till after hours. So what next? How do I get started? So ideally, I'd start on the baseline supplements. You ought to be doing that anyway, right? Come into the store. We do curbside service. If you're out of town, certainly, absolutely, we ship. You can go to our website and order it, or you can, give us a call and we can be your personal shoppers. I've got a great staff and they're very happy to help you. If you haven't had these labs drawn recent and or depending on where your symptoms are, then let's look at the labs. Let's look at what I would consider to be a full thyroid panel, okay? Have your practitioner order them. Again, if they won't order them or you've got high deductible and want to do it as economical as possible, go to our website there and that can help. And this should be a hot link in the slides. So if you didn't see it in your email prior, I think Eric had sent out a copy of these slides right around the start today. So you should see that there in your inbox. Adrenal salivary panel. So if you have a lot of adrenal symptoms and or are under a lot of stress or have had a lot of stress, and for some people it can even go back 5 years ago, 10 years ago, for some 30, 40 years ago, maybe you had an event that happened in early childhood and kind of suppress that information. Now all of a sudden it's kind of bubbling to the top. Yes, it can go back that far, affecting the adrenals. Then let's look at that cortisol and DHEA to see how the adrenals are going. Ideally, once you get that information, let's schedule a consult. Let's go over it. Let's put together a protocol specific for you. You can call or you can email Allison. She's our patient care coordinator. Her email is patientcare@southriverrx.com. and she can get that scheduled for you. So questions. Don't forget, use your chat feature there. You can type in the questions and we'll answer those while we're waiting for some questions to come through this afternoon. I will remind you, take the time, give us a review on the social medias out there. Follow us on the variety of channels. We do put different information in the different social media channels, as well as we'll do different specials and fun stuff there. Email newsletter, great way to get things out to you. We try to keep it informative, try to give you some specials, and I have never, nor will I, sell your information. So don't be afraid to sign up for that. And we try not to send you too many emails and overload that inbox. So questions. I know we've gone over a lot of information relatively fast today. Again, we could take a week going over this information. When I go and do presentations on for practitioners, for providers, I'll speak for doctors and nurses, etc. I'll do a 2 to 4 hour presentation alone just on the adrenals, right? I could spend a week on the adrenals. We could spend a week today talking about the thyroid. So I really did compress a lot of information into a short amount of time today. So I realize we're not going to make you experts, but at least this kind of opens your mind and gives you some actionable things to be able to do. We did have a question come through about, are there any good functional medicine doctors in Virginia? Yes, absolutely. There are a variety of doctors on the south side. You've got Dr. Aaron Hartman, Dr. Christian Vinsky. On the west end, you've got Mary Colfer and Neil Carl. They're at Welcome MD. So there are some on both sides of the river, and we do have more than that. Certainly you can reach out to Allison, and she can help fine tune that a little bit more if you need to as well. Any other questions this afternoon? I do want to thank you for your time today while I'm waiting for anything else to come in today. And I will mention, we are having a webinar next month. I believe it is the 18th of November. We're having Dr. Alex Capano from Ananda come and speak to us about CBD. And we've got a noon presentation for the public, and we are having a presentation in the evening for medical practitioners. So feel free to pass it along to your prescribers, to your nurses, to your PAs, NPs, etc. Absolutely, the more the merrier. We will be doing that virtual, and we will also be having a component of that in person. So if you are interested and want to come in person, the sooner you sign up, the better, because we will be limiting that with COVID, but certainly it will be unlimited with regard to the virtual aspect of it. Again, you can go to our website, you can go to our Facebook to sign up for that. So without seeing any other questions on board, again, thank you. If we can help you, again, please reach out, stop in, give us a call, send us an email, send us a message on one of the socials, and we'll be more than happy to help you any way we can. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. Take care.